This week on 3 Questions with Corey Kareem.
I always believe in you've got to be open to change. You have to be. Leaders don't fight change. They embrace it. It's not that you get comfortable with failure, but you recognize the value of failure. While it's great to make content for people who are marginalized, we also can just tell stories with marginalized people that are for everybody.
Now, before we get started with this beautiful conversation, please help a brother out and click on that follow button on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to another episode of 3 Questions with Corey Kareem, the podcast where I sit down with some amazing people who are doing some amazing things. And that's right, you guessed it. We ask them 3 questions, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I know. I read the comments. But rather than just talk about my guests, their wins or their successes, we tend to start the conversation around their failures or mistakes. Most importantly, the lessons that they learn from those individual experiences. So, with that being said, my guest today is a powerhouse in the entertainment marketing world. Currently, he serves as the VP of Marketing at Disney Canada. That's right, Disney Canada, where he's been shaping brand narratives and driving audience engagement since 2008. With a career spanning over 2 decades, including key roles at Cineplex and Omni TV, my guest brings a wealth of experience in integrated marketing, digital strategy, and brand development. Beyond his corporate achievements, he contributes to the industry as a director and board member at Canadian Pictures Pioneers. So, without further ado, Quincy Kelman, welcome to the podcast, brother.
I don't know who gave you that. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Quincy, I know I gave you quite a bit of a lightweight intro. Is there anything you'd like to add to what I just described about your career in just that little minute bit there?
Almost 2 decades. I'm not that old yet. No. I think that was a great intro, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. So let's jump right into this. So I said in the intro, I usually like to start the conversation around mistakes, setbacks. Some people will call them failures. So however you want to describe that. So reflecting on your journey, your career journey, your personal journey, however you want to think about that, can you share a pivotal moment, either in your career or personal life, where you took a significant risk that didn't go as planned, or where you made a wrong move or mistake? How did that experience shape the leader that you've become today?
Yeah, I mean, yes. The answer is yes. I mean, first off, I think as leaders, the only way you become a leader is by failing, because when you fail, it means you've tried, right? And I think that's the part that everybody needs to get comfortable with. This part that I for sure had to get comfortable with was understanding that when I didn't succeed at something, it didn't mean it was the end. In a lot of ways, it meant it was the beginning, because it meant I had to reset, recalibrate, and continue to try to work to find that purpose, that thing that I was looking for. And so for me, I go way back to when I was in university. I was fortunate enough, I got a scholarship. I got to go play football and run track. I was really proud of myself, and, the opportunity, to go to a junior college and it blossomed into a full 4-year ride. That was my dream. I had always dreamed about being a football player, being this athlete. And, I went down with all these hopes and all these thoughts in my head that this was going to be successful and this was all going to work out. And within 6 months, I found myself back at home.
Wow.
Pressing full reset, trying to find a school, having to go back to high school because I didn't finish, because I got this scholarship. I didn't complete high school. I had to go back to high school, get a credit that I needed, and for a lot of people, that could be extremely demoralizing, because here you are as this, we've seen it so many times played out in film and television. I mean, where the high school hero ends up nowhere, working a minimum wage job, and someone super successful comes back and is like, what happened to you? And so for a moment, I really felt deflated. I felt like, what, is this how I'm going to end up? How am I going to get myself this credit that I need, and it was in a course that I was terrible at, and still to this day I'm not great at.
Right.
You know, what university is going to want me? How do I take what I've learned already and get back in? But also in my head, I was like, how am I still going to play football? Because I want to play football, and you know, this dream now is it fading? Is it being taken away from me? And you know, I was fortunate enough. You know, I come from a family of non-quitters. You know, we push forward. You know, a child of, you know, my father is an immigrant, and, you know, my mother from a hardworking family. And so, you know, never gave up, you know, refocused, got through that class, got that credit that I needed to get to, got into a university that, you know, hey man, they had a struggling football program, so they needed players. It played to my advantage. You know, I leveraged what I had, and you know, and I got in and I stayed focused. And, you know, it again, throughout that journey, even, you know, I got injured, career was over, didn't know what I was going to do. I was getting this degree in a field that I didn't know how I could apply it. And I just thought back to that initial setback and, okay, well, let's recalibrate. And, you know, I love talking to high school students because they're still looking to shape their careers. And what I always kind of tell them is that, you know, for me in that moment, I realized, okay, I'm not going to be a professional football player. So what is it that I love? I love sports. Great, check. I love content. Movies, TVs, music, love content. Not going to be an actor. Sorry, I wish I had a face for that, but I don't. You know, and I kind of figured out the spaces that I loved, the things that I love, not necessarily the job that I love. And that's a lot of people I find do that. They think about the job they love and then try to fit themselves into a bucket. I kind of reverse engineered it and said, what do I love and how can I be in that space? Because I knew in that moment that was the only way I was going to remain engaged, and that became my mission. After that, I only applied to jobs, careers in sports, in film and entertainment, in automotive, because I love cars, still love cars to this day. That's all I did. I had no experience. I just kept knocking on that door. And then, you know, and eventually I got into this space, and then I just continued to apply.
Wow, I love that. There's so many parallels here. There's so many things you touched on. So I thought about myself. One of my biggest failures, and I've shared this on stage when I spoke in Chicago, is like, so I went to school in New York. I think we were chatting about that earlier on. And I had a personal situation that brought me back home. And I remember you talk about you and your football career going down and having to come back in a short period of time. Here I was thinking that my rest of my life was going to either be spent in New York or living somewhere in the U.S. pursuing my advertising dreams. Right, I kind of wanted to be like the black version of Jerry Maguire, but just in advertising. That was kind of my vision.
Nice.
And then, you know, I was 25 years old, working for a British ad sales company on Wall Street at the time. And for all intents and purposes, I was like exceeding where I was at, because I was a kid who grew up in Mississauga. At the time in high school, I used to tell everybody, I'm going to move to New York. Everyone was like, how? And it ended up happening, right?
Yeah.
And then personal situations bring me home. I just remember, Quincy, being on my mom's couch in a basement, being like, WTF, man. Like, I did all the things right. I graduated with a 3.2, 3.5 GPA. I did internships at MTV, Atlantic Records, all the places. I'm like, how and why am I here? And so I can remember that setback. And the word that came to mind when you were describing your story about having to come home and your football career kind of being, you know, shifted, was a loss of identity.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many people that work so hard and into a sport like football, like yourself, and I see you're a Raiders fan. I'm assuming you are. I'm a Raiders fan as well. You know?
I don't want to break your heart, man. I just happened to find a hat that fits, so, you know.
Okay, fair enough. But I feel like that loss of identity is such a hard mental shift. You even see this with professional athletes, like after their career is done, they're like, you know, what do I do? You know what I'm saying? So that came to mind.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if I was to jump in there for a quick second, one of the things that I have found, and there's a young guy who works with us now who's pursuing his dreams of being an actor, and I fully support him. But when we talk, I always try to remind him that a dream doesn't end if you don't end up exactly where it's supposed to be. And, you know, again, I mentioned the students that I've had a chance to talk to. A lot of them come up to me afterwards and they want sort of a further explanation of what I'm trying to tell them. And what it is that you've got to remember something. You love, okay, in the case of me, you know, I love film and entertainment. I love this industry. Being in front of the camera, that would be the ultimate dream. And that's something that's the pinnacle. But it doesn't mean that because I'm not on the camera, I'm not living that dream still. Every day I wake up and I go and I live in this industry.
Right.
I experience it. I meet people. I'm visually, I'm consuming it. Right. There are things that I've worked on that, you know what, in some ways have brought me more joy than ever being in front of the camera could. Yeah. I still get to express that feeling, that energy, that vibe that I would have gotten from being on camera by being behind camera and being in my office every day. Right. Is it the same? No, it will never be the same. And I don't think it should ever. That's the part you got to get comfortable with, is recognizing that it won't be exact, but it's still living the dream. If someone met me who, you know, and I went to school in Mississauga too as well, we'll talk about that. Yeah. But, you know, if someone met me and saw me today, they would be like, you're living the dream. Because even though I was in the school plays and did a little bit of acting here and there, I'm still living the dream because I work for the Walt Disney Company, because I work in entertainment, because I associate with people in this industry. And here's the fun fact, I'm still on camera. Just even the other day, I had to do some interviews, and here I am on camera doing what I had always dreamed about, living that dream, being interviewed, being asked questions. So is it the same? No, but the dream is still there, right? You know what I mean? It's still being experienced.
Absolutely. So something you just shared there reminded me of something I came across, and I said, like, letting go is a skill. And where I'm going with this, Quincy, is that sometimes when we have a dream, a vision, a goal, we figure that in order for that goal to be considered a success, it has to happen exactly how we envisioned it. And you have to let go of the how it's going to work out and just let the process be the process. You know what I mean? So sometimes I say, like, you know, the success is in the attempt. The fact that you just went out and did the thing, whatever that thing is, that's a win right there. Because so many people have ideas, thoughts, visions, and never really act on them for, you know, whatever reason. But the fact that you're able to go out there, that's already a win. And then whatever happens there is kind of a success in its own.
So I couldn't agree with you more. 100%. And you said it so good too as well. Like, if you never try something, and again, it goes back to how I sort of started this whole thing, is that leaders are leaders because they try. It's not that they succeed at everything they do. It's that they try. And that's what I try to tell everybody. It's what I try to tell my girls. You've got to try. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to attempt. One, and it's dangerous to kind of say this, it's not that you get comfortable with failure, but you recognize the value of failure, right? And so it's a really good thing you said there. I agree with you a lot, yeah.
I like how you just phrased that, recognize the value of failure, because one of the big podcasts I listen to is Diary of a CEO. I don't know if you know him, Stephen Bartlett, Dragon's Den panelist, used to run a social media company, has his own podcast now. And one of the things he had talked about is his podcast team is a large team, about 60 people. He has a head of failure and experimentation. So that guy's job is to just go out and find new things for it to work. And he gets graded on how many new things they try, whether it works or not. And he said something at a conference I heard him speak at about almost a year ago. He said, failure is just feedback. It's just information.
That's wow. That's cool.
And I think if you just frame it like that, then I think so many of us don't become afraid to fail, because it's information, it's feedback. So I try to, when I'm on the phone with my clients and I'm talking with them, it's like, if they don't get the results that they get, I'm like, this is just information for us to use and pivot and guide us moving forward. It's not, this didn't work, don't ever use this again. No, it's telling us something.
Of course, man. And I love that, because for me, you know, I've got an amazing team. You know, I'm not comfortable taking credit for a lot of the work we do, because I know there are so many people behind me who are actually getting this done, who actually help it become, you know, a real thing. And when we talk and we are presented with new opportunities, that's one of the biggest things I have to talk to them about. That's where I find myself really getting involved. Is like, guys, it's okay. We're going to try this. We're going to go and put it out there. Yeah, it's a lot of money. I get it. But guess what? We're either going to really do a great job and learn that this is something that is a tremendous amount of value, or it's not going to work, but we're going to understand why it doesn't work. And hey, maybe the next one we can come back at it and we can look at this thing a completely different way. And so, but it is an acquired taste.
Yep.
It is something that
1000%.
you have to get used to. Again, I will always go back to this. Good leaders learn the value of it. They really do. And they understand it. And they don't shy away. I mean, me personally, I love change. I think change is an amazing thing. We learn from it. I've always found I learn more from change than I do from sitting in a classroom, right? And so failure is one of those things that can lead to change.
Yeah.
You can look at your business and say, you know why this didn't work? It wasn't the product, or it wasn't our approach. It was, we had just the wrong people on it.
Right.
And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change your job for you. This is where you're better at. This is where your strengths lie, and this is where this person's strengths lie. And you can do that. It's happened to me personally. Yeah. And next thing you know, you flourish. It's just identifying. It doesn't mean you're not going to learn this other task or whatever, and you're never going to be able to get another chance at it. Yeah. It's, especially when you're starting out, the opportunity to excel at something that you do really well opens the doors for other opportunities.
1000%.
Right? So, and a lot of people are scared with that. They're afraid, like, oh, right away I have to try something new. No, wait a second. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with doing a job really well. And then that'll open doors. We'll see if you can do this too as well. We'll see if you can do that, knowing we can always rely on you for this, right? Anyhow.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I got to get you to speak at Student Day. I'm on the ad club committee. Say you love the kids. We'll talk about that and see if that's an opportunity. Fair. So what's one mindset shift or personal habit that's had the biggest impact on your growth as a leader in such a high-stakes creative environment?
I would have to say empathy. It's something I focus a lot on, both professionally and personally.
Yeah.
You know, my wife is very in touch with her feelings and her emotions. And I see how she taps into it, and it's a tremendous value. I think it's the thing for me is I've had to learn that. I know there's a lot of things, again, there's things I know I'm very good at, and there's things that I know I'm not great at. And you know, empathy for me, you know, I come from a Caribbean background on my dad's side, an English background on my mom's side, and both cultures aren't known for their empathy, you know, and
fair enough.
Right. So, you know, you get into an environment where you're dealing with different personalities and you know, different issues, and everybody reacts to things differently, you know, and I'm a kind of person where something bad happens, I deal with it in the moment and I move on, but not everybody's built the same way.
Right.
And not everybody accepts you know, challenges and things that happen in life the same way. And for me, I've had to learn to understand why someone is emotional about something, why someone is upset about something, why someone is angry at something. And that has been a huge sort of shift for me. It's not something that I'm comfortable with. It's not something that I do a lot of. And so I've spent years working on that. I would say, you know, I'm in a much better place now, but I'm also very open-minded to, you know, criticism on that or critique on that or feedback on that, because I know I'm still trying to get better. I'm still trying to improve, man, every day.
No, I love that. I think one of the things for me is there's two things actually that come to mind. Letting go. I found out letting go is a skill. Sometimes I could be guilty of trying to have the last word in a heated debate with friends, or, you know.
I don't like losing either, man.
You know, that competitive spirit in me, right? You just don't want to lose, but learning to let go. And there's also things that maybe, you know, I'll just use it in the context of work. You go into a presentation and you envision a certain outcome, and that outcome doesn't come to fruition. Like letting go that, oh, did I not say this right? Did I not hit on these notes? And kind of letting go of that outcome. And then I would also say is, and Ivan used to say this all the time to us, is focus on what you can control.
Yeah.
I use that a lot in every aspect of my life. So for example, if I'm running late to the airport, I stop doing this, stop looking at my watch, because I can't control time. I'm like, I'm in the Uber or I'm getting a ride from someone. I'm doing the thing that's going to get me there. Stop looking at my watch, because it's just going to give me more anxiety. Yeah, I'll figure it out. If I missed a flight, I bought the type of ticket where I could spend $100 that get me on another flight. So I just, that's like the second thing that I've kind of put in my life to help me control this crazy mind of mine sometimes.
Yeah, they're all really good points. I mean, listen, on both of them, the first one, I totally get that, and I used to be terrible. I shouldn't say I used to be terrible at that.
Yeah.
I was in an environment where I was working with people who were not great at that. For me, and again, because I played sports, and this is one thing that I have found even in recruiting personnel. Anybody who's ever played a team sport has learned that skill of learning to let go, because my coaches used to always tell us you have to have the memory of a goldfish. Goldfish don't have memories. Short-term memories. You got to move on. It's normal though too, and again, this goes back to the empathy piece that I've learned. It's also normal to hang on to those things for a minute, and so it's really about trying to find that balance.
Yeah,
because there are some people who that's the way they get through things, is going through it in their head. What did I miss? What didn't I miss? But there needs to be a blend of both, and that's just me saying sort of, you don't be hard on yourself for that, because I think it is, again, this is, the empathy coming through, is it is natural to kind of think, I could have done this better. I mean, I just recently did something, did a favor for someone, a fireside chat, and I had overbooked myself, and walking out of it, I was walking with a colleague, and I turned to him and I said, oh man, I didn't do great. And he goes, no man, it was great. I'm like, no, I felt rushed, and 5 minutes of that is all I needed. I just needed 5 minutes to let it out, and then I moved on. Honestly, within an hour, I was thinking about 10 other things. So it is that balance of finding it. Yeah. And then the winning piece, I hear you, man. Listen, I work in an office. We do this great activity. I learned it from a mentor that I work with, where we do movie quotes. So we'll do our planning sessions, and we'll take a 10, 20-minute break to do a list of movie quotes, and we'll quote different films. Yeah. And we then have to guess them. So you had a blank sheet of paper, you write down 20, and you try to guess them all. This thing gets heated. People are in, man. And it's like, you got to get that quote, and you got to get that title right. I remember one time we were playing it, and I just wrote down Lord of the Rings, but I wrote down, LOTR.
Right.
And so, no, that doesn't count, because you didn't say if it was the third or the fourth.
That's funny.
So competitiveness, again, it's a good thing in a moderation, right? I think this is the thing. At the end of the day, we're trying to balance all of this different stuff, right? That's what leaders are so good at, is balancing. It's understanding the differences between the team, and then trying to find the connector that makes them all work. And so, looking at people's strengths and things of what they're really good at. I've got some people who are super competitive, and I lean into them when, I need a certain job done. And then I have other people who, again, very empathetic. I'll lean into them when I need something else done. And it's finding that good in everyone that you have, some you hired, some you inherited, leads to a really great cohesive team, all moving towards the same objective, right? So it's great stuff, man. It's good.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So I love this question here. So interesting to get your take here. With so many platforms fighting for attention, what's Disney's secret weapon in the Canadian market, and how do you convince families to prioritize, your content over companies like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, YouTube, and homegrown players like Crave?
Yeah. This is a bit of a loaded one, so I have to be very careful here, because one, I don't want to spill a secret sauce. I also don't want to disparage any of our competitors. It's very important. So I'll come back to the first part of your question in a second. But on the competitive nature of the industry right now, it's actually good. It's a good thing. Yes, we can thin it down a bit more, but competition breeds better quality content.
I agree.
All right? If we don't have competition, we don't have choice, and we just have to consume whatever is given to us. I think by having all of these players in this space, with us all being challenged, and Disney as a content, I can only talk to the content part of it. We have a theatrical business, and then there's the streaming business. In the streaming business, yes, we are all chasing Netflix and that part of that business, and that's because, hey, listen, they were first out. We've got to give them, we got to give them their flowers, right? But what they are doing has created this sort of revitalization in the home entertainment viewing, which is a space that has just constantly evolved. I mean, we've gone from radio to black and white TV to color TV to then flat screen TV to video, beta, VHS, DVD, DVR, all of these things to now here we are in the streaming service where a consumer can actually decide when and how they want to watch things. And that's phenomenal. So, and there's different players in all that space, right? And so what Netflix, what Prime, and what all of them are doing is just pushing us, which is a traditional 100-plus-year-old company, to be better, to continue to sharpen that tool, to be the best at what we do. Now, what does Disney do better than all of them? Disney is the greatest storytelling company in the history of this business. And that's just fact. We take not only stories that existed in the world, but we also take original ideas and just create something that nobody else can do. And I think, directly looking at a company like Netflix, one of the big benefits we as a company have is that our content is our content. Netflix, yes, they're the leader in the streaming space in the sense of offering up a place for people to watch.
Yeah.
But they're learning how to tell stories.
Right.
We have been telling stories. It's the foundation of what the company is built on. And so I firmly believe that Disney is consistently looking to tell the best stories, whether it's Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Lucas, 20th Century, FX, Hulu. It doesn't matter. This company is constantly finding great, original, and adapted stories to tell that every year. I mean, look at last year's Emmys. And I don't want to get the number wrong because I'm being recorded here. But Disney won the most amount of Emmys in the history of the Emmy Awards. And it was with stories like Shogun and The Bear and Only Murders in the Building. These are original IP and in some cases adapted IP, but told in the highest caliber form possible. And I think that's Disney's secret sauce is that we just have this legacy of storytelling.
Right. So what do you think is one thing Disney could do better or more of?
Well, and again, I'm being really careful because I need my job. I think, listen, as a company, we're trying to find the balance between all of the amazing brands we have.
Yeah.
And I think, it's it can be a challenge at times. But, I think that's a tough question to answer, to be honest with you, because I don't know. Listen, we're learning again. We go back to failure, and the company consistently learning from failure. You hear Bob Iger talk, and he would never say that we have succeeded 100% at anything.
Right.
But I think as a company as big as ours, I think learning to manage all the pieces is the biggest challenge that we could face.
Absolutely, because you guys have such a massive catalog. To your point, one of the most impressive brands in the world, up there with the Nike and the McDonald's of the world. And Disney has put out so much great content. I just think you guys are obviously a market leader. Obviously, Netflix is a leader in the streaming aspect of the business, but in terms of storytelling, no one does it better than Disney. Now, at a glance, Canada and the U.S. share many cultural similarities. So my question is, how does Disney tailor its marketing strategy and priorities in Canada to reflect those distinct national differences? So in other words, putting this is, what sets Disney Canada approach from its U.S. counterpart? Like, what's the difference there?
Yeah, and it's a great question because we do get asked that a lot. And, like I said, there is a team here that exists. And the whole point of us is to identify the opportunities that exist here in Canada. And so, there are people in the company who develop a global strategy, and that strategy is then sort of brought to the markets. And then this is where the regions get involved and kind of look at those nuances to determine, what is going to work in Canada. There's not a mandate from this amazing company that, you have to do things a certain way. It's that here are the global strategy and here are the key points that we all have to align with.
Right.
Everything else is up for grabs. And so what our team does is, one, first of all, we're all Canadian. We all live in this country, most of us born in this country. And we all come with different sort of perspectives of the Canadian identity, which I firmly believe is the strength of a good marketing team, is that diversity of voice.
Right.
And, our approach is to, one, understand, first off, what doesn't work in Canada. So there are certain things, if you lean into, and again, I can't get into specifics, but there are certain things if you lean into, that's not going to appeal to Canadians.
It's not going to resonate well.
It's not going to, but there are other things like cultural stuff. Like, listen, this country loves hockey. Whether we want to agree with it or not, this country loves hockey.
Fact.
So leaning into, let's say the U.S. has a plan and there's a big portion of it that is focused on the NBA. They're going to have integrations and all this kind of stuff. For us, we would stop and pause and look at that and say, well, is that actually the best tool for Canada? No, it might be hockey. And that's me just simplifying it.
Of course.
To sort of dig it down even further, family films in general, the U.S. is very fortunate that they have a larger sort of family demo that they can work with. In Canada, ours is much more narrow. And so when we get a film, when we get a family film, when we look at a family film, none of us, anybody in this industry could sit down and say, okay, well, we're just going to get kids. We're just going to get moms and dads. If we do that in Canada, our percentage of box is going to be nothing. So we have to look at that and say to ourselves, okay, we have to identify the adult consumer in this title that we can specifically target. And it's not as blanket as, well, we're just going to get all adults and we're just going to get all mom and dads. It's like, no, let's look at this film. We look at something like Inside Out 2 last year, where we looked at those emotions and we asked ourselves, where are Canadians feeling the most amount of emotion? And we did this amazing partnership with the NHL where we became the official emotions of the NHL. Because it is during that playoff window. And truthfully, this could have worked if it was the Raptors. It could have worked if it was the Blue Jays. It just so happened that it was during the middle of the NHL playoffs. It just so happened the Raptors, breaks my heart, weren't in it. But it worked. And we tied that together. And Corey, man, it was a phenomenal program. Because what we did is we identified the emotional connection that Canadians have to hockey and tapped into that. And sometimes it's easy. Sometimes something like an Inside Out 2 is super easy and that's going to work. But then, other times it can be more complicated. And especially when you have stories that are maybe more American in tone, those are the ones where we're really challenged. And in those cases, what we'll look at is things like, we'll break it down and say, okay, well, there are Canadians who are interested just in general in history. We know what that looks like. Let's find those Canadians. Where do those Canadians consume history? Whether that's, museums and things like that. But also there are certain things we just know about Canadians. Like Canadians are a very well-read group of individuals. It's fact. Canadians read a lot. They consume books, audiobooks, physical books. So we know when a film or a piece of content is based on literary content, there's a huge chance it's going to actually succeed in Canada. There's just these little nuances that you learn throughout your time, but also data that we get from partners. Partners like yourself working at Spotify. We know musical taste. One of the things that's fascinating to me is how a huge hip hop fan, and correct me if I get this wrong, how Rap Caviar is this big, huge hip hop playlist, but in Canada, it's actually a different playlist that was more popular. And why that was, don't really know, but it was the difference that existed in our market. That's something about Canada. Maybe it was the use of Rap Caviar and they just didn't like the term caviar. I don't know. But there are all these little things that exist in Canada that people just assume, well, you speak the same language. Well, that's not it at all. Also, we're very aware that as an industry, as a market, as a group of people, as Canadians, we're far closer to our European friends than we are to our American friends. And that's no disrespect to our American friends. It's just culturally, when you look at the makeup of Canada, how it was put together, founded by, the British and the French. So both cultures still exist here because I think one of the underlining things about the Canadian identity is that we never were built on forcing people to sort of become a
melting pot.
Exactly. Right. We allowed you to keep your identity. It's one of the biggest challenges we have sometimes when you talk to people, because they'll say, well, Canada doesn't have an identity because we embrace all identities.
Correct.
But then I argue, well, isn't that what we do so well? Is that, again, I think I said it before, that when you talk about diversity, when you talk about differences in tones and voice, especially in the marketing space, I think the reason Canada does so many amazing things is because you're getting authentic, diverse voices. It's not forced. I sit in a room and I can sit with one team and we have, one team member who is from the Emirates, from the Middle East. We have another person who's from Asia. You know what I mean? We have somebody who's Canadian, born and raised here in Canada. You put those three people in the room, and then I come in and I bring my West Indian background in. You've now got four very distinct voices building a program together. And I think that's one of the unique things that we have in Canada versus, again, not to slag them, but versus our friends down south, where everybody always approaches everything right away as, well, this is what we do in the US.
Right.
In Canada, it's a little bit different.
Right.
Because my experience is very different than your experience, very different than his experience, very different than a lot of other people's experiences, right? So I don't know if I'm answering the question well, but we're very different, and we do understand the differences.
Yeah, and to hit on some of the notes you shared, I think from afar, it'd be hard for you to tell, in most cases, not all, the difference between a Canadian and a U.S. just by looking at them. Even in some cases, our accents, depending on what region you are, they're not too distinctly different, but the attitude and the mindset, I think, is the biggest differentiator between the two countries. Because, sometimes what I've found, and I don't know if you found this yourself, is if there are times where you are very direct in your approach, they'll be, oh, that's very American of you. And I'm like, when did being very direct become an American thing? But I get it. And to your point, Canada is a come as you are country, right? Bring your culture, bring your heritage with you. Whereas America is a melting pot. And I even find the UK to also be a bit of a melting pot. Because I find no matter where you're from in the world, everyone gets that British accent within like a 5-year period.
Yeah, no doubt. No, you're 100% right. And I mean, listen, for the sake of the podcast, I can give you some things that are very sort of obvious but not obvious. There's things like spelling. All right. There's the dual languages. Remember, our country has 2 official languages.
Correct.
No other country in the world has 2 official languages that I'm aware of. Canada is one of them that has 2 official languages. So you're always approaching everything that you do in this country with the mindset of there's an English and there's a French side of this. And we've got to think about that. There's things like theaters. The spelling of theaters in Canada is different than the spelling of theaters in the US. These are just little minor nuances that Canadians do pick up on. The other thing is just the way we go to movies. In Canada, we tend to not rush out. We tend to be a little slower in going out. We still go out opening weekend. And, kudos to the team. They do an amazing job encouraging people to actually go earlier. But Canadians naturally find movies afterwards. It's just, again, almost 20 years in this business, we've seen this several times where, Canadians will just slowly keep going to a movie and films will play longer. I think culturally, Canadians are a little more relaxed. You know what I mean? There's not the same sense of I have to have it urgency now. Exactly. And again, these aren't bad things. It's great. It's great that we're like this. It's great that we can have these conversations. But for us working in this market, it's one of the big identifiers. And I've worked with people who've come from the U.S. down here, and it's one of the things they say they've got to learn right away is that Canadians are not. The desire to have right away is not there that they see back home. But it's all good. It's all good, right?
The appetite is a little bit different. I definitely noticed this. So let me ask you this here, Quincy. If you could offer just one piece of advice to someone aspiring to reach the top of their career, or even step into a role like yours, what would it be and why?
Well, I think one is, again, I'll go kind of started off with it and I'll go back to it, is identifying the things you love in life. My daughter is 16 and she started talking about a career. And one of the first things I had to do was teach her not to say job, but career. And she's like, why? I said, well, a job is a thing you do. A career is a thing you love. She's like, what? Dad, that's such a dad thing. I was like, no, it's a fact thing. Because if you don't love what you do, and I don't mean the profession, I mean where you have to go, whether it's in your house and you turn on your computer or actual brick and mortar, if you don't love that, doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or if you're a marketer or an accountant, you're not going to want to be there and you're going to be looking to go every single time. But finding the environment that you are so passionate about not only, when you figure out what it is actually you want to do, are you going to be locked in? You're just going to be locked. I mean, I look at my team. I've got people both at the agency level and on the team who are at least 10 years in on the business. On the agency side, it's unheard of. And people are like, why? Well, it's because we're getting people who are all like-minded, who all love an industry so much that to be an agency rep or to be a coordinator or to be, a director or whatever it is in this business is just everything to them. But again, it's because they love the industry. If you get, and I've worked with some people who don't, and they don't stay. And it's because they don't have the same passion. They don't fit. They don't feel the same vibe that we're all feeling. So I always tell people, start with a love. Start for a love of something. And again, it goes back to that. I love football, I love sports, all these things. Start with that. Focus on that. And then when you get in, I always believe in you've got to be open to change. You have to be. Leaders don't fight change. They embrace it. They find ways to make it work. You don't have to chase the shiny new penny. That's a whole different philosophy. But when a new leader comes in, your job is to understand what makes that leader tick. What is it that they're looking for? How is it that you can take their philosophy and apply it to what you do? It doesn't mean you change everything and throw it all away. This person also has to learn. But you do have to understand that that person coming in has an idea, an identity that they've sold to the company, and you've got to be able to buy in. So I think adapting to change is a key component. And then I would say the last thing is just never stop learning, no matter what way that is. For some people, it's continuing to go to school. For others, it could be listening to a podcast or reading a book. But whatever that is, don't stop, because as the industry evolves, you only show your age when you don't know what's going on, when you don't know what's happening. Do I have to go to every concert that my kid talks to me about? No, I don't. But should I listen to them when they're talking about it so I understand who that person is, so that if I get into a conversation and there's a leader in there who happens to be 10 years younger than me and they're talking about something, guess what? I'm the guy who can identify that. I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Here's what it's going. But again, people look at that and they don't think that that's education, but it is. Life is education. Talking to people is education. And I think that's the best leaders that I see. Our leader at the company, and I'm afraid to say his name, but, when you look at Bob Iger, who, look at him and where he is in his life, he's a legend. And when you have a chance to hear him speak, whether it's through an article or a video or whatever, this person is just constantly evolving and learning. They're learning what's going on and they're adapting to the market when it started. You got to think, when he started, everybody watched TV, and now everybody's streaming. And this guy has led through all of that. But he continues to just evolve. And I think, to me, those are the pieces that I would say as a leader you've got to be comfortable with.
I love that. So many notes you hit on there, man. So many good gems shared right there. But really quick, I want to get your thoughts on Sinners, the movie, the Ryan Coogler. We're talking about this offline, but you had some great perspectives. I think it's also cool to share how many movies you see on average every year, so that people know.
I mean, I watch a lot of movies. There's actually someone we work with who always wins the challenge because she somehow watches even more than I do. But I try to see about 100 movies a year, if not more.
Wow.
I think it's very important if you're in this industry that you're consuming content. How could I look if I walked into a room and someone's like, hey, have you seen Thunderbolts? And I was like, no. And it's my own movie. Or if I haven't even seen my competition's movie. Or if I'm not streaming content from competitors. You know what I mean? One of my favorite shows is Mobland right now that I'm watching on Paramount Plus.
I love
it's a fantastic show.
Love it.
But why would I not watch that, right? And, we talk about Sinners, and I have to tell you, the minute I saw Sinners, the minute I heard about Sinners, first of all, I'm a huge Ryan Coogler fan. I think what he's done at his age is phenomenal. I think, you see filmmakers come into this world, and I put him in the same sort of space as the Scorseses and the Spike Lees and the Spielbergs. There's something about his filmmaking that you instantly is identifiable. And so, you asked me about Sinners, and the first word I use, and I've used this with everybody, is that there's a sense of cool with it, and not a pushy cool. I don't even think he was trying to be cool, but when you watch the film, it is exactly what you feel. It is cool. Every environment is cool. Every character is cool. And when the lights come up and that final credit scene is done and you're walking out, everybody just in the room, there was this sense of coolness that we were all in on something, that Ryan let us in on something that, we could talk about or we could keep to ourselves, right? But we all felt that same feeling. And I just, I haven't felt that way in a film in a long time. And I watch way more movies than I probably need to. But it was a real phenomenal experience, and visually just such a cool. There's a great scene in the movie. We've all talked about it. Anybody who's seen it, we've all talked about it. I think the scene I'm talking about where they're playing the music, and you're at first when you're watching, you're like, I think there's a mistake in the movie, and then you're like, no, this is intentional. Yeah. This is intentional that he's doing this, and it just locks you in, And there's another part of the movie, for me personally that I liked, and I don't want to give it away, but we talked a bit about it, was that he didn't take the easy way out in making the movie. He could have, as an African-American filmmaker making a movie in the Deep South during segregation, all of these elements going on, he could have taken the very easy way out in doing the film, and he didn't, which I think is part of the reason why, and again, this is an opinion, I think it's part of the reason why it's seeing such at least success here domestically. Right. It's because when you finally go in and see it, you realize, oh, wait a second, this is just a great movie. Yeah. Which is where we need to get with our industry, is that we need to understand that content, while it's great to make content for people who are marginalized, we also can just tell stories with marginalized people that are for everybody.
Not isolate others.
Exactly. Right. And I honestly believe Coogler has become a bit of the master of that. It could be his age and everything, all that, sure. But I think it's more than that. I think he just gets it. He understands it, that in order to get these stories to reach people beyond you and I, he has to tell them in a way that is inviting, right? He doesn't have to just lean into the easy stuff that's always sitting there that, unfortunately, some filmmakers, that's just what they go for, right? But a great movie. Everybody should see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just said to me that great stories are undeniable. So really quick, we're going to end with this card game I came up with called 3 Questions. So just to give you some context, I told you a little bit how I spent a couple of days in the middle of the jungle in Costa Rica. And while I was on this kind of self-retreat, I came across this thought, Quincy, and the thought was, no one will talk you into or out of more things than yourself. And I was reflecting on that because throughout my life and my professional career, there were more than a few moments where I cheated myself out of an opportunity. I was in a boardroom and we were brainstorming and I had a bunch of ideas, and I sat there because I was afraid that my idea wasn't great. And then I hear someone else say what I was thinking and everybody applauded. And I was like, I had these little moments like this in my life. So I thought it'd be really helpful if I came up with a quick card game to help people have more productive and constructive conversations with themselves. So what I'd like you to do, these ones are real light. Don't worry, I got nothing heavy in here.
It's all good.
You got to pick 2 questions from there, 2 cards from there, anywhere from the deck, and answer them to the best of their ability.
Okay. So the question is, what habit do you have that works against you the most? I would say that I can be a procrastinator. And I don't understand why, because I'd like to get things done. But there are things, and I think it's more of a personal life thing. I prioritize work a lot more than I do my personal life.
Guilty of that too.
Yeah, and I honestly, I wish I didn't. And I'm trying to get better at making sure I do not let things sit as long as I do, because I will tell you, one of the greatest feelings is when it's done. It feels better than almost anything. So I am trying to get better at that. And the other one, what do you love to do? It's funny, listen, I love it. It's tough because I think it goes back to, I feel like I'm doing what I love to do, right? My career is what I love to do. I don't want it to go away. I know at some point it will, but I love being in this space. But if we remove that and we can kind of get into the personal, I love to cook, and I love to be with my family. So every Sunday we make a big meal. I do most of the cooking in my house. I find cooking extremely therapeutic because when you cook, you need to use your hands and your mind. And so that means I can't answer emails, can't answer the phone. I can't think about work, because if I think about work, I'm going to cut my finger off. I've got to think about the meal that I'm preparing in front of me. So I love coming home after work and cooking dinner. And I love on Sunday getting an idea, making a more complicated meal. And then the kitchen table in our house is a sacred space. Phones, nothing are allowed at that table. It gets a 16-year-old girl, a 13-year-old girl, and my wife and I down at a table for 20, 25 minutes to connect as a family.
That.
What happened in your day? What's going on? What do I need to know? What's not happening? There's arguments. There's wild, crazy Uno games that happen. But all in all, it's all around that communal table and that family and around that meal. So I think that's what I would say I love to do outside of what my work.
I love that. I have one final one for you. What's a quote or a mantra that you live by currently?
Oh man,
a favorite one that you like at least?
Yeah. No doubt. There was, I just happened to see it, so I'll use it. It was "Be Water," which is something that Bruce Lee said. There's actually a documentary where it's titled "Be Water," and he talks about it. It's a sports documentary, and when you hear that, you're like, "What? Be water?" And the reason he says that is because water is this amazing thing. And the smallest little hole in a rock, water can find its way through. And I think in life, you're up against, and if I'm trying to remember exactly if this is how he said it, but you're going to be faced with challenges. You're going to be faced with obstacles. Your thing is to find your way through. And don't let it stop you. And that's kind of why I like it, right?
Getting poetic right now here, Quincy.
No. But that's Bruce Lee. I'm not taking credit for any of these things.
Yeah.
But I think that to me kind of hit, because I was like, I got this guy here, what he's saying, right? So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Quincy, man, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, your gems, the game you've given us in the platform here today. Well, guys, excuse me. This concludes this episode of 3 Questions with Corey Kareem. As for many of you know, I like to end each episode by saying this. Sometimes you don't need to learn anything new. You just need to see or hear that somebody else went through it too. And we just heard Quincy just drop a lot of great gems and nuggets here today. So with that being said, Quincy and myself are out. Peace and love. Until the next time.